He said that the moment the last knot came undone, the cloth seemed to stick to his fingers, as if it didn't really want to be opened. It was rough, damp in places, as if it had been stored in a place that didn't exist inside that house. The attic behind him made a long, cracking sound, like wood stretching bones after being immobile for a long time. He took a deep breath and opened the package. For a second, he didn't understand what he was seeing. It was just a small object, seemingly simple. A metal toy car, scratched, with paint missing from the edges, one of the wheels bent. It could have been anything, until he recognized the mark on the bumper. It was a deep, crescent-shaped scratch, exactly like the car he had as a child, the one that broke the day he suffered the worst accident of his life, a car he saw being thrown away, a car that had never been in that house. Could you breathe after seeing an object you know was lost reappear wrapped up in the attic of a place you've never lived before? He stared at the toy as if looking into a distorted mirror of his childhood. The red paint, though faded, still bore stains of dried mud in the same places where he remembered dragging it around the yard of his mother's old house. And when he turned the toy car upside down, he saw the mark his grandfather had made with a penknife, engraving his initials so no one would confuse it with his cousin's. It was his, the same one, the toy car that should never have been there. At that moment, the attic let out a warm sigh, a heavy breath of air hotter than the rest of the room, as if pleased that he had recognized the gift. The lamp upstairs flickered, casting trembling shadows on the covered furniture, and for a moment he had the distinct sensation that all the sheets hiding things began to discreetly turn toward him, as if the entire attic wanted to witness his reaction. His heart began to beat so strongly it seemed to draw attention on its own. He stood up too quickly, almost tripping over his own feet, the toy car still in his hand. The wooden floor responded with a series of creaks, following his steps as if something were walking beneath the boards, tracking his every movement. He thought about dropping the toy right there, but an idea flashed through his mind with frightening clarity. If he left it, it would be like refusing. And he didn't want to find out what that thing would do if someone refused a gift. Would you have the courage to drop the object that a stranger left for you on the floor? Or would you do as it did, go down holding it just to avoid provoking it? He carefully descended the attic stairs, each step creaking a little louder than the last, as if his weight were being recorded. With each step down, the air seemed to change temperature. The heavy heat of the attic faded, giving way to a damp cold rising from the floor below. When he finally stepped into the hallway, he felt the hairs on his arm stand on end all at once, as if he had crossed some kind of barrier. Behind him, the attic door closed slowly by itself, with a long, decisive sound, as if someone had pushed it with the palm of their hand. He turned around instantly, the toy car almost slipping from his fingers, but it was too late. The door was ajar. No wind, no draft. Only the certainty that whatever had left the gift was pleased that he had come down with it in his hands. In the kitchen, he tried to act as if nothing was happening. He placed the toy car on the table, turned his back, turned on the stove, put water on to boil, opened a cupboard, any movement that seemed normal. But the silence in the house wasn't normal. It was an attentive silence, as if every drawer, every plate, every chair was leaning forward to listen. The feeling was that the whole house was looking at the toy car on the table along with him. When he turned to get a glass, the toy wasn't where he had left it. It had moved a few centimeters to the right. He froze, his gaze fixed on it, and he saw the cart move again, very slowly, dragging a wheel stuck on the wood, as if someone were pushing it with an invisible finger. It wasn't his imagination. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't a tremor. It was movement. At that moment, he didn't scream. He didn't run. He didn't throw the object away. Instead, perhaps by instinct or morbid curiosity, he spoke to it. In a faltering but clear voice, he said, "I know this cart was mine. How did it end up here?" The question came out and hung in the air, heavy, uncomfortable. The cart stopped immediately. The water began to boil on the stove, the kettle whistled, the clock on the wall made a dry click, marking the passage of a minute. But the rest of the house remained still. And then, coming from the ceiling, at a point exactly above the table, he heard a sound he had never heard there before. A short, hoarse laugh, as if something were laughing for the first time, with a throat not made for it. The laugh didn't repeat itself, but it left a trace in the air, a vibration that seemed to accompany his breathing. He turned off the stove, left the kettle there, and picked up the cart. As he closed his fingers around the metal, he felt a tingling sensation run up his hand, arm, and shoulder, as if something had taken advantage of the contact to feel as well. Immediately, a memory flooded his mind. Him, a child, sitting on the floor of his mother's house, pushing the cart down the hallway, listening to his grandfather's voice calling from outside. The memory came so vividly, with so many details, that it seemed as if he had been ripped from the present and thrown back into that exact moment. He could almost smell Sunday lunch, hear the sound of the TV in the living room, feel the texture of the cold floor under his knee, but something was wrong. In the corner of the memory, which he had never noticed before, there was a shadow standing at the top of the stairs, watching. A shadow that, at the time, he had ignored. But now it was there, inside the memory, too clear to have been invented. He dropped the cart immediately, the metal hitting the table with a dry sound. The memory vanished all at once, as if it had been cut with scissors. The silence became heavy again. He understood, in that second, what the thing in the attic was doing, using objects as doors. Doors to remember, doors to enter, doors to get closer. That gift wasn't a gesture of affection. It was a hook, a way to snag memories, feelings, pieces of who he was. Have you ever thought that there are things in your house that may have seen everything you've lived through? And maybe they aren't just things anymore? He decided to test the limit. He picked up the cart again, this time carefully, as if holding something alive, and spoke in a low voice, almost a whisper. "What do you want from me?" The house took a few seconds to respond. In the meantime, the hallway lights flickered. The window pane trembled as if someone had touched it with their fist, and the faint sound of something scratching the ceiling began to repeat itself. Then the answer came, not in words, but in sensation. A warm weight on his chest, a pressure on the back of his neck, a chill at the base of his spine, the clear, direct, brutal impression that the thing up there wanted exactly what the house in the other script had wanted. Permanence. But here there was an extra detail. The attic wanted to be remembered. It wanted someone to claim what was stored there. At the end of that afternoon, he made a decision that he now says was his biggest mistake. He went up again, with the cart in hand. Each step he climbed seemed higher than before, as if the staircase were growing just for him. When he pushed open the door and entered the attic, the air enveloped him like a heavy embrace, smelling of damp wood and old iron. The dim light barely reached the corners, but he noticed that something had changed in the arrangement of the objects. The boxes that had previously been piled haphazardly now formed a kind of corridor, as if someone had cleared a path to a specific point, way down at the back. He moved forward, feeling his eyes being drawn to that place. At the end of this makeshift corridor, there was something else he hadn't seen before, an old high-back chair, perfectly positioned facing the small attic window. On top of the chair, a notebook. And on the notebook, exactly in the center, something that made his stomach churn, a photograph. He recognized it instantly. It was him, a child, holding the same toy car in front of his mother's old house. But there was a detail that completely chilled him. In the reflection of the window glass behind the image, high up, at the point where the attic of the other house had been, there was a dark shape, the same size as a person, leaning to the side as if observing the moment the photo was taken. He felt his legs give way. The toy car slipped from his hand and fell to the attic floor. But it didn't make a sound of metal hitting wood. It made a sound of something falling into something hollow, deep, as if there were an unlimited space just below the surface. And when he bent down to pick it up again, he realized that the boards there weren't sturdy. They seemed like just a thin skin stretched over a void that seemed deeper than any house foundation, a void that breathed. The thing inside the attic had left a gift, and now he understood. It wasn't an offer. It was an invitation. Would you have the courage to keep opening gifts from a place that has been watching you since childhood, from different houses, different cities, different times? Have you ever had the feeling that something accompanies you your whole life, changing shape, changing place, but never going away? Tell me below what you've felt. And if this story is giving you chills, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, because the next gift he finds doesn't just come with memories. It comes with something that wants much more than to be remembered. He said that after seeing the photograph, that impossible photo, that silent proof that something had been with him since before he knew what fear was, the feeling inside the attic changed completely. It was no longer just a presence watching. It was a presence waiting. The wood beneath his feet seemed to vibrate, as if the emptiness under the planks were restless, breathing faster, recognizing that he had finally understood that the present was not just a memory, it was a connection. He took a step back, but the light from the lamp hanging from the ceiling flickered in an almost human way, like a warning, as if to say, "Don't go down yet. Don't finish now." The photograph trembled slightly on the notebook, and in an almost imperceptible way, the focus of the image seemed to move. His face, as a child, became clearer. The shadow behind him became more defined, and the feeling that it was alive, not only in the photo but in the entire attic, filled the air. He took a deep breath, trying to convince himself that it was all an illusion, tiredness, accumulated panic. But as he turned to leave, something new happened. A box beside him fell on its own, opening violently and scattering objects across the floor. Among them was a small leather wallet. A crackling sound echoed through the attic, as if an invisible column had straightened itself, waiting. He didn't want to touch it, but something inside him knew he needed to look. He bent down slowly, feeling the floor sink slightly under his weight, and opened his wallet with trembling fingers. Inside, he found an old, stained document in his grandfather's name. Nothing unusual so far, until he turned the page. There was a handwritten note, strong letters, hastily scribbled, "Don't open the attic. He remembers." The word "he" seemed to vibrate on the page, as if it were heavier than the rest of the sentences. When he looked up, he noticed that the photograph on the chair was now lying face down on the thin wooden floor. The open notebook displayed a page written in handwriting that didn't resemble his grandfather's nor his own. It was an irregular, slanted handwriting, as if written by someone holding a pen for the first time. The sentence was simple: "You kept this in me." He felt a chill run down his spine, so quickly it almost knocked him over. What had he kept? When had he kept it? How did the attic of another house from another time, know something he didn't even remember keeping? When he ran his hand over the notebook, searching for another clue, everything around him seemed to react. The lamp swayed slowly, casting shadows that didn't follow the expected movement. Instead of moving with the light, the shadows seemed to approach like bodies leaning towards him. The chair creaked without anyone touching it. The emptiness under the floor let out a muffled whisper, something between a breath and a groan. He clutched the cart in his hand, as if it could serve as protection, but at the same instant, he felt a current of warm air rise between the boards, enveloping the object, almost as if the attic recognized that he was holding it. That's when the part he could never recount without shuddering happened. A voice spoke. It didn't just call him by name. It didn't laugh. It didn't whisper memories. The voice simply said, "One is missing." And the echo of that phrase seemed to travel through the entire attic and return to him in different forms. One, as if the environment were repeating the word to memorize it. He suddenly recoiled, stumbling over an old suitcase that had also belonged to his grandfather. The suitcase hit the floor, but didn't make the expected sound. Instead, it vibrated as if it had struck something living. When he opened it, he found torn papers, stained photographs, and at the bottom, a dark wooden box with a rusty latch. His hands were sweating, but he opened it. There was a key inside, small, old, warm, too warm to have been kept in that cold place. The instant he picked it up, the voice returned, but this time it didn't come from the air, nor from the shadows, nor from the emptiness under the floorboards. It came from inside his own head, as if it were a memory, as if it were part of him. "You locked it. Now open it." He didn't remember locking anything. He didn't remember any hidden door, any forbidden box, any ritual, any secret. But the key seemed to pulse, as if trying to remind him of something buried so deep that only the attic, whatever it really was, could access. He looked around, searching for what he should open, but the attic remained in absolute silence. Until, little by little, the floor beneath his feet began to move. Not like wood breaking, but as if the surface were indicating a path. The boards in the right corner vibrated twice. The key warmed in his hand. He approached, knelt down, and carefully pushed the board. It lifted easily, as if it had been waiting for that touch for years. Beneath it was a narrow, deep hole, smelling of damp earth, and at the bottom of it, something wrapped in dark cloth. He reached as far as he could, pulled out the bundle, and placed it on the fragile floor. The cloth was damp, warm, as if it had been left there minutes before. When he opened it, he found another toy, a doll, small, old, with a torn dress and a burned face. He didn't remember that. A doll, but the doll, it reminded him. Because the instant his fingers touched the fabric, another memory, one he never knew he had, exploded as if someone had opened a forbidden file inside his head. He saw himself as a baby, crying in his mother's lap, while his grandfather locked the attic of the old house with a padlock identical to the one that matched the key in his hand. And behind his grandfather, standing in the shadows, the same doll sat in the toolbox. The memory was impossible. But it was real. It had been with him from the beginning, and perhaps it had never gone away. The attic vibrated strongly, the windows trembled, the light bulb exploded silently. No spark, no light, just total darkness. And in the midst of that darkness the voice came with terrifying clarity. "Now you remember. Now give it back to me." He dropped the doll. He dropped the stroller. He dropped everything. He ran, stumbling between boxes and living shadows, trying to reach the door. But behind him, something crawled across the floor, too fast to be human, too heavy to be an animal. He felt fingers, long, thin, icy fingers, touch his ankle at the last instant before the door opened. He fell down the stairs, feeling the air leave his lungs and his heart almost leap from his chest. The attic door slammed shut behind him, making the entire hallway tremble. And then came the worst moment. Despite being outside the attic, despite having escaped by seconds, he still held the key. It burned in his hand, And even outside, with the door closed, he heard the thing in the attic speak again, but this time with his own voice. "The last present is missing. What would you do if you were in his place? Would you open the presents, throw away the key, try to set the attic on fire? Comment below and don't forget to like and subscribe, because when he decides to find out what the last present is, the thing inside the attic decides to come down to him." He said that after that last sentence, that voice using his own intonation, as if he were outside the door, not trapped in the attic, something inside him broke. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was the terrifying certainty that the thing up there was learning too fast. The key burned in his palm as if it had been left in the sun, and for a moment he thought of throwing it on the floor. But when he opened his fingers, he realized he couldn't. His hand simply wouldn't let go. It was as if the key had decided to stay there, as if it had found exactly where it wanted to be. He took a few steps back, breathing heavily, feeling the hallway narrow around him. Not physically, but perceptually, as if the walls were slowly tilting, trying to hear his heartbeat. The attic door was motionless, but there was something behind it. He felt it. A heavy, warm, impatient presence. The wood seemed to pulse, pushing the air, breathing at a different rhythm than his. When he finally managed to look at the doorknob, he saw the metal move. Not a sudden twist, not a complete turn, just a tremor, as if invisible fingers were testing the strength, experimenting with the movement, checking if he was still there. The doorknob trembled again, and the voice, the one from before, the strangely familiar one, murmured so softly it seemed to spring from within his own head. "Open, I left more." He ran to the living room, but running didn't help. The whole house was different. Not only did the attic now seem alive, the whole house was breathing, murmuring, creaking in unison. The sofa sank slightly on its own when he passed by, as if someone had sat down at that very moment. The curtain swayed without wind. A picture frame fell slowly, as if invisible hands had turned it. And on the table, the toy car and the doll, the two objects he had left in the attic, were now there, together, side by side. It was as if they had walked all the way there while he stumbled down the hallway, gasping for breath, courage, an explanation. His throat tightened. It made no sense. Nothing did. But what terrified him wasn't just the fact that the objects had moved. It was how they were positioned, the toy car leaning against the doll as if they were holding each other's hands, like two children being brought back to their place of origin. He tried to leave. He turned the key in the door, pulled hard, pushed with his shoulder, but the door wouldn't budge. Not because it was locked, but because it seemed stuck to the frame, as if the wood had fused into one body. He banged, kicked, shouted for help, but the sound seemed to disappear before it reached the air. The house swallowed any noise that contradicted its will. And then, for the first time that day, a laugh echoed down the hallway. Not a human laugh, not a child's laugh, not a feminine laugh. It was a mixture of everything at once, an attempt at laughter, like someone learning to imitate emotions without truly understanding them. Laughter echoed through the walls, and when it subsided, something fell to the kitchen floor, a small, light object that rolled until it hit the baseboard. He approached slowly, his heart pounding against his ribs, and saw what it was. A smooth, white stone with his other initial engraved on it. The initial he used when he was even younger, before the toy car, before the doll, before any organized memories. An initial he never told anyone. An initial that only appeared in childish scribbles in a notebook that disappeared decades ago. He knelt and touched the stone. The house responded. The light flickered, the shadows moved, and the voice, his voice, but younger, purer, whispered, "You forgot, I kept it." It was at that moment that he realized he wasn't dealing with a spirit or a ghost or an ancient haunting. What lived in the attic was something different, something that collected pieces of what he had been. Something was reconstructing his past, piece by piece, object by object, memory by memory. Each gift was a piece. Each piece was an invitation. Each invitation brought the thing closer to him. And there was more, because when he raised his face, he felt a shift in air behind him, a tall, bent, motionless presence. He turned slowly, very slowly. In the hallway, just below the attic door, there was a shadow that didn't match any object in the house, a shadow that stretched almost to his feet, even without enough light to justify it. The shadow contorted, forming something like an elongated arm, and pointed at him, not as a threat, as a demand, as if to say, with that impossible gesture, "There's still one left." He recoiled, stumbling on the carpet, his heart almost bursting from his chest, but the shadow advanced another inch and spoke without making a sound. He didn't hear with his ears, he heard with his mind, in the most invasive and intimate way possible. "The last gift is you." He screamed, but the scream died before it left his throat. The house responded with every wall, every floor, every window, vibrating simultaneously, like a huge creature preparing to embrace what it considered its own. The key burned so intensely now that it seemed alive. And behind him, the attic began to open its door on its own, slowly, creaking, calling. He said that when the attic door began to open by itself, every fiber of his being begged to run, but there was nowhere left to run. The house had closed all paths, not with locked doors, but with its presence. The air was too thick, too dense, too alive. It was like moving inside someone else's lung, as if each step were authorized or denied by something watching very closely. The door rose only a few centimeters, creaking as if it were being scratched from the inside, and the darkness that leaked from it was not an absence of light. It was a substance, heavy, dripping down the doorframe like spilled ink, taking over the hallway, climbing the walls. He backed up until his back touched the living room table, and it was at that moment that he understood. He wasn't alone, not physically. The shadow on the floor followed his movements, but didn't obey any angle of light. It was the shadow of something else, something above him, something that moved on the ceiling with a fluidity that didn't belong to anything living. The attic door creaked open again, and then silence fell. Not the natural silence, but the kind that cuts, that isolates, that recalculates the air. He expected to see a shape, a body, something that would explain the presence, but there was nothing but that living, pulsating darkness, undulating as if breathing, and in the middle of it something small shone. An eye. Not human, not animal, but an eye that knew his name. An eye that seemed to recognize him from before he was born. An eye that should never have belonged to this world. The whole house vibrated as if it had a heart, and he felt, for the first time, the entity's true intention. She didn't just want to watch him. She didn't just want to imitate him. She wanted to complete him. She wanted something that had been missing since childhood, something he had lost, something that perhaps had never been his, but that the creature believed belonged to the collection of memories it treasured like jewels. The shadow descended from the ceiling, forming an outline of something curved, elongated, boneless, illogical. The hands, if they could be called hands, slid along the wall, leaving marks that glistened as if they were wet paint. And then the voice came. Not from the walls, not from the creature. It came from within him. "You opened it when you were a child. I just waited for you to remember." The phrase entered like a cold blade through his mind, opening memories he didn't want to have. He saw flashes, the old attic, broken toys, laughter that wasn't human laughter, a promise whispered behind old boxes. He saw himself holding the same key he had in his hand now, only smaller, with trembling childlike fingers as the thing whispered something about guarding what is yours. He fell to his knees, trying to block out the images, but they came in waves, each heavier than the last. The entity moved another inch, and the shadow touched the ground like an intelligent liquid. He felt the air grow warmer, closer, as if the creature were pressing its invisible face against his. The voice returned, now using the voice he would have had at 8 years old. I brought everything back. Only you are missing. The key began to tremble in his hand, not as if it were about to fall, but as if it were trying to choose between two realities, to open or to break. He stood up slowly, feeling panic and lucidity clashing inside his chest, and stared into that living darkness. For a moment, he saw something forming there, a childlike arm holding another, a toy car being pulled by long fingers, a faceless doll moving on its own. The entity was reconstructing a past that never existed correctly, a past he didn't remember because it wasn't his to remember. It was hers. It always had been. He took a step. The house vibrated. The creature inclined its head in a gesture of recognition. And then the voice, the real one, the definitive one, said his full name, exactly as his mother had said it when she wanted him to stop what he was doing. It wasn't his mother's voice. It was the voice of the house, of the attic, of the thing. He raised the key, and the darkness parted like a smile. Now give it back. And in that instant he understood. It wasn't him who had been summoned to the attic. It was the attic that had waited its whole life for the moment he would finally return home. The creature took another step, and, for the first time, the hallway seemed to disappear around him. There was no more room, no door, no wall, only the attic, only the shadow, only the house which now seemed to breathe inside him, filling his mind with memories that didn't belong to any human. He closed his eyes. The key burned. The attic door slammed shut on its own. And the silence was so profound it seemed to swallow the world. When he opened his eyes, he was in the attic, but not the attic from before. An attic that seemed larger inside, as if the house had revealed the part of it that had always been hidden. The creature was there, complete, waiting. And then it extended something, a small, almost circular object that shone with its own light. Its last gift. He took it, and felt the world spin, fast, deep, as if he were being pulled back to a place he should never have left. The creature spoke its last sentence. Now you remember. And what happened next? Well, no one could explain. The house was empty, silent. But sometimes neighbors swear that during the night, a voice calls his name from inside. A voice that sounds like his but isn't. And now I ask you, if your house called your name in the middle of the night, would you answer? If you've made it this far, comment if you've ever felt your home alive. And don't forget to subscribe and like, because stories like this only get deeper the further you delve into them.